Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this webinar on screen organization. It's a nice straight run through, just a few quick tips on it. It's relatively short. It's about a 15-minute presentation, and if you've any questions, we can get to those at the end.
Welcome to today's tutorial. Let's get started. Let's have a look at our agenda for today. Today we're looking at screen organization in Cscape. First, we'll look at why you should organize your screens in the first place. Then we'll look at the screen organization capabilities in Cscape and show the tools that you can use for that organization. Then, as always, we'll demonstrate this in Cscape. We'll also have some additional hints and recommendations, not only for organizing your screens, but also for developing your user interface in general. Finally, as always, we'll finish with a Q&A session. So first, let's look at why you should organize your screens. Well, as you're developing an application, you can have many different screens, and that can be hard to keep up with when trying to find specific screens, for example. The Horner OCS products can support a large number of screens, and even if you're using a controller from our Micro OCS series, which is our entry level, you could potentially have as many as 250 user screens that you could develop. With our other series, including the XL series, you have 4 times that number of screens available to you, potentially up to a number of 1023. So if you do have a large number of screens, you could easily spend a lot of time scrolling through looking for a particular screen that you want to edit, which obviously is something that you don't want. With screen organization, it makes it easier to maintain applications that have a lot of screens, not only when you're developing the application for the first time, but also when you're maintaining that application over time. It also helps you organize your applications which have a lot of similar screens, so you can make sure you don't accidentally go in and edit the wrong screen and then have to spend time undoing those changes. It's also useful if you want to find a particular screen. If you've organized your screens, you can quickly recall that specific screen and you're not wasting time navigating around searching for that screen that you want to edit. Next, let's look at the different screen organizational tools available in Cscape. Of course, you'll start in the Cscape graphics editor, which is where you'll do all your screen development. If you look in the upper left hand corner below all the icons, you'll see that there is a screen name area as well as a group area. Let's focus on the screen name first. The Cscape graphics editor allows individual screens to be assigned a name. Before you start editing a screen, by default there is no screen name assigned to that screen. So if you go to screen number 1 and you've done nothing to it yet, then it's just going to say blank screen like you see on the right. As soon as you start editing that screen and adding content to it, Cscape is going to assign it a default name based on its screen number. So if it's screen number 1, its default name is going to be screen 1. And if it's screen number 20, its default name is going to be screen 20, and so on. In addition to having the ability to assign more meaningful names to your screens, you can also assign them to groups. For example, you could have groups of similar screens or maybe groups of screens that are tied to a particular function. There is a single default group called main that's available, and any screens that get created are assigned to the main group by default. If you only have a few screens, that's not too important, but if you have dozens of screens, for instance, you probably won't want them all to be in the same group, since that would not make it any easier to find the screen that you're looking for. If you decide to add groups to your project, first you press the Edit Groups button, which is the button to the left of where the group names are shown. By pressing that, you'll open up the group tag editor, where you can add additional groups as well as edit the ones that you've previously created. Again, the whole point is to create group names that are logical, that make it easy for you to find what you're looking for. Similarly, for naming your screens, you need to press the Add Edit Screen Tag button. That pulls up a dialog that's going to allow you to create and assign a meaningful name to a particular screen. It also allows you to assign that screen to a particular group. Keep in mind that as you assign names to each screen, they need to be unique, so you can't have the same screen name being used by multiple screens. Now let's say you have a situation where you have created a screen and then decided you want to put it in a different location. For example, you started on screen number 10 and you've decided that you want to move that to be screen number 3. So after copying and pasting all the contents from screen 10 to screen 3, you have the ability to effectively blank out that screen 10 that's no longer being used by pressing the Remove Screen tag button. The default screen name of screen 10 in this example will be effectively deleted, and that screen will go back to just being a blank screen. That can be useful when you're tidying things up at the end. Once you've created your screen groups and you've named your screens and then assigned those screens to relevant groups, what functionality or advantage does that actually give me? Well, once that's all complete, you can now use your Cscape Project Navigator tool to navigate through all of your screen groups and to the different screens within those groups, and then quickly find that screen that you want to view or edit. Instead of opening the graphics editor and then just scrolling from screen to screen looking for the one you want to edit, using the Project Navigator tool is a much quicker method. Now, for those of you who haven't used the Project Navigator before or don't have it as a permanent fixture in your workspace, here's how you open it up. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. From the Tools menu, you can just click on Project Navigator, or if you have the icons all in your main Cscape workplace, you can find the Project Navigator icon and make sure that it's toggled to the on position. Then that will cause the Project Navigator to appear, and then you can size and dock that Project Navigator wherever you want it. Next, let's begin our demonstration of setting up our screen organization in Cscape. So I'll open up Cscape, and here is a project I developed for turning an XLE into a remote I/O block for Ethernet IP. Part of this project has been the user interface. So I'll show you how I've organized the screens for this project. So I'll open up the graphics editor and it's automatically pulled up the default screen, which in this case was screen 20 and not screen 1 in this instance. Using the View Screen Thumbnails option, I can look at the different screens that were developed for this project, and you'll see that there's many of them. Around somewhere in the 20 to 30 range were developed, and a lot of them look similar. So finding the specific screen that I want to edit could be time consuming if I don't utilize the screen organization features. Now I'll show you how I've set up that organization. Going back to the first page of screens, which is screen number 20, when I first went to edit it, it had a default name of screen 20. So then I assigned it a meaningful name, which in this case was Power Up. So this is my Power Up screen, and I left it in the main group because that is where this particular screen fit best. So looking at my application, how did I organize my screen groups? Well, keep in mind for this application, the whole function of it is to allow any customer that has an XLE of any model, be it 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, to use that XLE as an Ethernet IP remote I/O block. Depending on what model you're using, you're going to have a different set of user screens to show the I/O for that particular model, because every model has a slightly different I/O mix. So as we look at these sets of screens, there's a different set of screens for every XLE model. So it made sense in this case to make my group names based on the different XLE models. Of course, in your own application, you'll do it differently based on what you need. For example, you might have a group for setup, a group for maintenance, a group for the loader on your machine, and maybe a group for the unloader on your machine. Next, let's look at the groups that I've created. So I'll click on the Edit Group button here, and here are my groups. I left the main group alone, and then I have a model 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 for my different XLE models. Then looking at my screens, for all these different screens, I've assigned names that make sense. This is the LAN setup screen for model 2. Again, the names you assign to individual screens have to be unique. I have a LAN setup screen for each of the different models based on the type of navigation that I did, so I had to make sure that each of these LAN setup screens have a unique name. I ensured that by putting a few extra characters at the end to indicate what group this was part of, but mainly to give it a unique name. Once that's complete, I can exit out of the graphics editor and look at my project Navigator. Now if I go to the graphics section and I expand it, it shows me all my different groups from main to model 6. And I can expand individual groups to look at the screens that are assigned to a particular group. So if I want to quickly find a particular screen, let's say I want to edit the second digital input screen on my Model 4, I can double click here and quickly navigate to that screen and then do any editing that I need to do. One other thing that I want to show you is the remove screen tag option, which can help with keeping the navigation between your screens and groups tidy. If we take a look at the main group, you'll notice I have a power off screen and I have screen 101. That's the screen that still has a default name. So if I double click on this, I can see that this is a screen that at one point had some content, but that content has been erased, and it's now a blank screen that I don't have any use for. So what I can do is utilize this remove screen tags button, and now I've fully restored this back to a blank screen by eliminating the tag or the name associated with this screen. So now when I go back into my project Navigator and I go back to the main group, I can see that that blank screen is now gone. So those are the features that you can use to name and group together your screens. And by having the ability to access them from the project Navigator, it's much easier to find the screen that you're looking for. The last thing that we'll cover with you today are some hints and recommendations around screen organization. First of all, in general, you should always have a plan for your user interface. You'll be much more efficient in creating your user interface if you basically sketch or plan it out ahead of time, or even outline on paper what you want your screens to look like, which screens you're going to need, how the screen navigation is going to work, and how the user is going to navigate from screen to screen. If you work that out ahead of time by creating an outline, you'll find that you're going to more efficiently execute the user interface development portion of your project. This is much quicker than just creating it as you go. Once you've done that outline, then it makes sense to determine logical groupings of screens and assign a name to those groups. And determine logical screen names as well, remembering that all screen names have to be unique. Two scenarios that you'll find where organization is critical are applications with a large number of screens, because you can waste a lot of time searching around looking for that screen that you want to edit. The second is an application where you have a lot of similar looking screens. So without organizing your screens, you could go in and edit the wrong screen and then find it out later, and then you have to go back and undo that work. So in those situations, make sure you assign unique names to your screens and assign them to groups. So that concludes our session for today. Thank you for joining me for today's tutorial, and the Q&A session will begin shortly.
Okay, let's see what questions we have in. How can you rip the presentation from a webinar? We can send you the raw video file, or if it's just the PowerPoint section, we can send you just that as well. If you want to let us know if it's just the full raw video or just the slides, you can let us know and we can send you those directly. The video, perfect. Yeah, we can send you the raw video file after the webinar is ended. I don't think I'm seeing any other questions in after that. So as usual, we have next week is the menu object within Cscape, and you can register for that as always, as you can for the next couple. Failing that, I think if no one else has any other questions, we will get that video sent out to you. But other than that, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next week.